Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we are talking about the evolving Hurricane Elsa and the regions that it could go near in the near future. Before I begin, however, be sure to like and subscribe because trust me, you're going to want to stay tuned for updates throughout this entire storm. And we're just going to get straight into it here, starting with the Hurricane Hunters. Now, there was a flight earlier this morning that went into Elsa, and we have our second Hurricane Hunters flight, which is the NOAA flight. The other one, I think, was Air Force. And this one, you can see, is picking up some flight level winds of hurricane force. Now, keep in mind, though, these planes tend to fly around 10,000 feet, at least the low-level reconnaissance ones do. There was a plane that left at 130, but that is not low-level reconnaissance because those are the ones that take the data that goes into Miles upper level and drop sign. Those are like higher up in the atmosphere. So the one that's flying around in the storm is still flying around right now. There will probably be another update to this in about 6 minutes or so from as I'm recording this. So I'll be sure to refresh that when I do. But if we look over here, because those purple, that is hurricane force winds, but that's also the flight level winds. But on the top right of this screen here, you can see the surface winds, and you can see two instances around, it's about 12:30, and just not too long ago at 2:30. So both times we picked up winds, surface winds of about 75 knots, which, if you didn't know, is 85 miles per hour. And I was betting, Elsa's either going to be an 80 or an 85 in the 2 p.m. update. Sure enough, it is 85 miles an hour now, 991 millibars of central pressure, and it's still booking it west-northwest at 29 miles per hour. All right. And as you can see, the MSLP, quite a few occasions here where it got below 995, close to 990 on 3 occasions here as the Hurricane Hunters have been flying through. I think the next flight is going to be there's going to be one at 3:50 and another one at 4:30 in the morning the next day. All right, so, and then we're going to see, I'm sure, more flights throughout tomorrow as well. Now, I know what you all are wondering. What's the future of this going to look like? And we're going to be talking about that coming up very shortly here. So, current low position, this was actually as of 8 o'clock this morning. The actual low position is as of 2 o'clock just west of the island now. So the center has passed the Lesser Antilles and the Windward Islands. The effects are still being felt there, but the center has officially passed by. If we look at some model track guidance, don't worry, there's going to be a lot more model track guidance I'm going to be showing you guys too. This was as of 12Z. The 18C data usually comes out around 5 to 6 p.m. in the evening, so I'll be sure to keep you guys updated over on my community tab for that one. Because obviously I can't record a video for 3 hours. But as you can see, a lot of the track guidance does bring it right over Florida and maybe even after that up the East Coast. But I don't really want to focus on the East Coast yet because that's really far down the line. Now, in terms of what's steering it, obviously the high pressure, the Bermuda high, if you will, is what's steering this. Obviously it flows around like this. Clockwise flow around the high, counterclockwise around the low. Now, so here's Elsa. Elsa's right here now at this point. Now, Hispaniola and Haiti are very rugged mountainous terrain areas. So if the center were to pass over there, then Elsa would be weaker. However, if the center can stay just south of there and then be still over water when it hits Cuba, then it could be a stronger system. And also another thing, even after Cuba, if it just turns and goes into Florida, it's got a very little time over the Florida Straits here to strengthen. It might not strengthen at all. But if it continues to go west after that, up the eastern Gulf, which, as you'll see, spoiler alert, the GFS is showing, and then come up, then it could be a stronger system. All right, so, and some models you're also going to see that do take it farther north. All right, now that does weaken the system because it brings over Hispaniola and over eastern Cuba. Now, if you didn't know, eastern Cuba is more mountainous than the western part. But what that also does, though, is bring it over the open waters of the Atlantic. So what happens after that? Does it go this way? Does it go this way? That is also something that's going to be discussed as well, and something we're going to be finding out in the future. All right, so here's some key messages for Elsa. All right, now this is for the 11 a.m. advisory. I'm sure this will be issued again for the 5 p.m. major advisory in about 2.5 hours. All right. Hurricane conditions are expected in the hurricane warning area for the Windward Islands. Well, not the next few hours. I mean, it's already passed at this point. Heavy rainfall from Elsa. We could see outer bands from Puerto Rico today into Saturday. So Puerto Rico, still watch out. You could still see some tropical storm force winds, maybe gusts to 30, 35, even 40 miles an hour. increasing risk of strong winds and surge from Cuba to even Florida early next week. All right, so Florida Keys, portions of the Florida Peninsula, still pretty uncertain to the forecast. All right, so here is the track as of 2 p.m. Well, really, the track is from 11 a.m. because the track's only up there with the major advisories. Now, last night, if you look, especially yesterday, remember how they were saying this was going to be a 65, 70 mile an hour tropical storm at most, right? As it tracked through the Caribbean. Then 7:45 this morning, it became a hurricane. I mean, even when I woke, I think when I went to bed last night, it was 45. So like around the late evening, it's about 45 mile an hour tropical storm. Woke up, it was 60. Then at 7:45 in the morning, it became a 75 mile an hour hurricane and is now up to 85. But it's still booking it, west-northwest at 29 miles an hour. And what that forward speed tells me is that the high is still intact. Because if the high was weakening right now, the storm would be starting to slow down because there's nothing to really steer it. So the fact that it's booking it still, and it probably will be booking it probably until probably late Saturday or early Sunday, it'll probably start slowing down. Or when it starts making a northward turn, maybe it'll slow down. All right. So Haiti, Dominican Republic, South Coast there on Hispaniola, that's where our hurricane warnings are. Apparently hurricane warnings have been dropped for Barbados and the islands, but tropical storm warnings still remain for the Windward Islands and Lesser Antilles, and then the northern and southern portions still have tropical storm watches. Hurricane force winds don't go out too far from the center. I mean, this is a newly named hurricane or a newly recognized hurricane. This is the first hurricane of the season, in fact. But with that said, I mean, the hurricane force winds are pretty much right at the center, so you probably won't get them unless the center tracks right over you or right near you. Hurricane watches now and TS warnings for Jamaica, and then the North Shore of the Dominican Republic tropical storm watches, and then northern Haiti, southeastern Dominican Republic tropical storm warnings, and even southern portions of Cuba, the island off of the coast of Cuba there, tropical storm watch for you guys now too. Now the track, if you look at the National Hurricane Center track, and I'll even zoom in really close, but the black line doesn't take it over Hispaniola. It actually does keep it over water, but then it does touch Cuba a little bit. It does go, but keep in mind though, the waters are only going to get warmer. All right, so before we get into all that, we're going to start looking at some more tracks. And here is the GFS version of the ship's diagnostic message, which I like to use a lot. And it kind of tells you the shear as the storm is tracking along. Notice how it, up until like a week later, which will probably be gone by a week later, but up until then, shear is below 20 knots. So we're good with the shear. Sea surface temperatures over the next 48 hours are going to start getting really warm. They're already in the low 80s right now. They're only going to get higher from here. And probably between the next 36 and 72 hours, we're going to have the highest ocean water temperatures in the Caribbean. I'll show you where those sea surface temperatures are as well. Also, the forward speed, 29, 30 miles an hour. It's going to start slowing down over the next 48 hours. And heat content will also be going up. And that's kind of related to SST, and I'll be talking about that as well. All right, so looking at some of the model tracks. All right, so this is some of the early cycle tracking guidance. You can see most models, I wouldn't say all of them, but most of them do keep it south of Hispaniola. So that's like a check mark for the system. If it can avoid Hispaniola, it could either maintain or continue strengthening. And then brings it into the southern portion, if you want to kind of call it the Gulf of Cuba. I mean, it's still technically the Caribbean. Then it brings it up through Cuba. Some models have it in the eastern Gulf. Most bring it over either over Florida or off the east coast of Florida. So we're going to be taking a look at the models and look at them very closely over the next day or so as well. Now, what's funny is the European model, another spoiler alert, but I'll be showing you the models towards the end of the video. The European model brings us out to sea, but the European ensemble model tracks, actually, most of them do put it in the eastern Gulf. And most of them actually keep it pretty far south away from Hispaniola and away from Cuba. So the EPS, the European ensembles, are actually being very interesting here. And the fact that I've seen this shift is a little bit concerning. That could say maybe the European model might actually change its mind in the next model run, the one after this one. So we'll be watching for that as well. And as for intensity, right, all these models, at first a couple of them were saying it was becoming a Category 1 hurricane. Now that it is, a few of them are saying it's going to be a Cat 2. At this rate, I think it will be a Cat 2. The fact that it's been strengthening, like it strengthened 15 miles an hour just this morning, and then it just intensified another 10 miles an hour just now. So I feel like it's going to keep on this strengthening trend. I don't believe a Category 3 hurricane is likely. I think it's possible. I wouldn't really say a Category 2 is likely either, but I'm definitely betting on probably a Category 2, or at least a very strong Cat 1. Because really, as you'll be seeing in the, we're going to be talking about the favorability of the storm coming up like right now. So favorable conditions. You're going to see there's really nothing stopping this. All right. And as for the wind speed probabilities, for Puerto Rico, again, about a 20% chance or so, but you can still see some of those outer bands that's still just as dangerous here. And as for your timing, just want to make sure that was refreshed. Sorry about that. So as for the timing for you, earliest reasonable arrival time of those tropical storm force winds is probably a few hours from now. So hopefully you're prepared already in Puerto Rico. Dominican Republic, overnight tonight into tomorrow, and then tomorrow morning for Haiti and Hispaniola. For southeastern Cuba, I would say Saturday, late Saturday evening. Northern Cuba, probably through the day on Sunday. Then southern Florida, maybe very late Sunday night. Middle of the day Monday for Florida. Again, that's if we feel the winds. I'm saying if we feel the winds, when could they arrive? And as for like Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, probably Tuesday morning. But notice, even though the cone itself the cone extends into Georgia and South Carolina. But the cone of wind probabilities, right? We do see the chance of tropical storm force winds now, even for North Carolina. So you guys are kind of in that zone now as well. So it's edging itself farther north as each update goes forward. All right, so closer look at our alerts. Obviously, these were from 11 o'clock this morning. Here's the 2 o'clock alerts. As you can see, tropical storm warnings from Dominica down through the islands. Antigua got tropical storm watch. Puerto Rico, nothing for Puerto Rico, though. That's not to say you can't see a gust to tropical storm force or you could see a rain band, but don't necessarily just wait this out, or don't ignore it, I should say, in Puerto Rico. Hurricane warnings for Hispaniola, Haiti, southwestern coast of Dominican Republic, and we have hurricane watches for Jamaica around Kingston, Georgetown near south of Cuba, tropical storm watch for you guys. Again, those are kind of like your latest alerts. Now, again, some more model tracks. You can see these set of model tracks from the Weather Channel here. All right, pretty much all of them, if not most, if not all, bring it south of Hispaniola, and actually between Jamaica and Cuba, and then eventually coming onshore Cuba. It'll probably come onshore for Cuba, and then most of them, including the GFS, if you can see by the yellow one, a few of them do bring it into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Water temperatures. Water temperatures are already good right now. It's sitting around 82 or so, but it's only going to get better. Not only the sea surface temperatures, right? That's not the only thing. We're gonna keep explaining this here. Sitting at about 82-degree waters right now. It's going to pretty soon make its way into this 83-degree water, so it's going to get a little bit warmer. But look at like around southern Cuba, like around here. That's where the water temperatures have gotten close to 85, 86. I know the number isn't there, but the darker reds do show potentially above 85, even on southern Cuba. And then in the Gulf of Mexico, 84. So even the eastern Gulf is still pretty warm. And even if it were to go east, if it went up Florida's east coast for some reason, it would still be probably 83, 84 because of the Gulf Stream. All right. Now, wind shear. Wind shear, there's not much of it. The only wind shear there really is to the north of the system. And this shear right here isn't affecting the system itself. It's only shredding off the cloud tops that aren't associated with it. The storm itself is not getting impacted by shear and probably won't be in the future. There's really nothing here. The only wind shear there might be a little bit of is when it gets near Florida, but even that is still very low. And there's really not much dry air either. Look at the water vapor loop. Very little bit in the Northern Caribbean, and if I would have played this in a loop, you would see that any dry air that is there is actually getting pushed along with the system. None of it's actually interfering with it. All the dry air is back to its east. All right. Now, another thing is also going to be the oceanic heat content, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. Here's from AccuWeather here. As you can see, kind of like what I just explained. Little to no dry air, low shear, and conducive conditions for strengthening in this zone, especially in the Eastern Caribbean here, and even the Central Caribbean Sea. So here's what I was explaining about the oceanic heat content. So the sea surface temperatures, right, out in this region in here where Elsa was just tracking through, they're warm, but also it matters what is below the ocean surface. And look in the Caribbean here, right between Hispaniola and Cuba, right, kind of like in this zone right here, is where we have higher oceanic heat content values, even on the higher end of this scale. So what is better than warm sea surface temperatures? Warm sea subsurface temperatures, because that's going to feed even more energy into the system. All right, so oceanic heat content also plays a big role, and it's only going to be increasing as the storm tracks west. It's going to get closer and closer to it, so expect oceanic heat content values to keep increasing as we head towards the near future. Like I showed you here, 30, 20 units or so, and then it kind of goes up into the 40s and even close to 70 over the next 60 hours. So increasing oceanic heat content values for sure as it heads through the Caribbean. All right. So again, as we head towards some of the models here, we're going to take a look at the GFS, Canadian and European models. Hopefully in the next day or two, maybe we can start using some of the shorter range models as like the NAM model, maybe even the high resolution model when the storm is probably already arriving by then. Also, we'll look at the HWRF model because I know it's a good intensity model. And they were pretty much the ones predicting that it was going to be a 74-mile-an-hour hurricane or 75 right as it hit the islands. I was looking at the models yesterday, and that is actually what it became. So HWRF, I could say, is a good intensity model for like a short to mid-term. But anyways, here's the GFS model. Now, notice I would like to focus more so on the track than the intensity because the last 6 or 7 model runs, they had this as like a more intense system. But focus on the track. Notice how that center is definitely like clearly south of Hispaniola. Maybe it grazes eastern Jamaica, but Jamaica's not as big of a threat to the system. But then it goes over Cuba, right, over like western Cuba, then heads back over the Gulf, and you can already see it's starting to grow again. As soon as it heads in the Gulf, it doesn't waste any time, right? And then organizes a bit more, potentially is a strong tropical storm, maybe Category 1 hurricane, then over Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and then eventually off the East Coast. All right, and we'll see. It's going to get interesting potentially for you guys in the East Coast. Canadian, what about now? Canadian is starting to switch up a little bit. At first, they were saying something similar to the GFS, but now, actually, let's go to the European model first because I want to tell this a bit more accurately. European model, again, they do have it tracking south of the Dominican Republic, but then they have it kind of making like that northern turn through eastern Cuba, which is going to weaken it even more. But this time, instead of just getting pulled out to sea like the last European model runs had, they do have a little area of spin here off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina that does make its way north. Like as you can see, right here, there's a little bit of spin, but then after that, it does sort of disappear. There's really not much left of it. Maybe they could drag off another area of spin separate from that, but European model, it's getting a little closer to what the GFS is showing, but not really. At least the European's not showing it, just going completely out to sea and missing everybody. Now, the Canadian is a perfect mixture of the European and the GFS. Because the Canadian has it going pretty much right over Hispaniola, which would sort of weaken it a little bit, right? Then over eastern Cuba, which as opposed to western Cuba would weaken it even more. But then it merges over the Bahamas and gets over the Gulf Stream in the western Atlantic. And then we got a big system on our hands making landfall in eastern North Carolina, or maybe even the Outer Banks. And then potentially could be an East Coast runner, could go out to sea a little bit more. But either way, in this position, already producing some banding through the Delmarva and even New Jersey. And then maybe even some big waves as well. So Canadian is like a perfect mixture of the European and the GFS because the Canadian has it going further east like the European was showing, but it's showing a stronger system like the GFS was showing. So this is a perfect blend of the GFS and the European model. So as our final model here, we're going to go over the HWRF, which in my opinion is a good intensity model. This goes out about 5 days exactly. Before we do though, we're going to take a look at the latest aircraft reconnaissance. I just refreshed it here and you can see this is the one pass it made. It came back, made another pass through the system. It might make a third one. Nothing really indicated says it's finished yet. It's still flying around in the storm. Pressure they found was about, I saw like on the maps because there's maps that show the last 10 minutes. I found 991. Apparently here they found 993. Either way, there's still 85 mile an hour sustained winds. And if we look at the updated surface wind graph, you can see again, there's that spot where they found the 85 mile an hour winds, 75 knot winds. Definitely some areas though where they found some pretty high rainfall rates, over 30 millimeters an hour, maybe 1 to 2 plus inches of rainfall per hour. So they found some pretty heavy rain in those same areas as they found the area of high winds. So it's trying to get an eye, but if you look on radar, it's better to see on radar than satellite. You can see the quote-unquote eye a little bit better. Now we're gonna get into the HWRF here to finish off. Now I use the parent version because it's kind of zoomed out a bit more. If you're zoomed in too much, you don't really know where the storm's at. It's the same thing as the regular HWRF. It's just zoomed out a bit more. So as you can see, watch as the storm continues to organize itself together. Now notice the HWRF how it keeps it south of Hispaniola. That's key number one. That's our key. I don't know. It's a key fact, or not a fact, but it's something that is very important because like I said before, if it goes south of Hispaniola, and especially it even avoids Jamaica as well, then it goes into the central part of Cuba. And I have a sustained wind map right after this too as well, so you don't just see the energy. Then it goes into Cuba, then out over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, all right, as a probably strong tropical storm, if not Cat 1 hurricane, that comes right on shore, right around the Big Bend, which is kind of like pretty much exactly what the GFS has so far. And then pretty much goes right up into Georgia, and I can't say this because, I really can't say this because it's not what the model's saying, but if you were to extend this, it would probably go somewhere along the East Coast, probably by then, if you were to extend this, but that's as far as I can go. But then goes right up through Georgia and South Carolina is all I can say for right now, because that's how far out the model goes. Sustained wind graphic here, as you can see, look in the top right, because this also tells you the pressure, but better yet, the sustained max winds as well. So it's easier for you guys to see. Now, according to the HWRF, watch as it heads south of Hispaniola, it hits that area of where, like I said, there's so much more heat content, right? Remember what I said before, the area of heat content, right? Let's rewind it a little bit so you can see 86 knots, 97, 100 knots. If you don't know, 100 knots is 115 mile an hour Cat 3. All right, it would not surprise me if this was a Cat 3, if it can avoid Hispaniola and eastern Cuba. It's pretty much going to go right into central and western Cuba if it doesn't hit the eastern part of the nation already. All right, so probably either way. So pretty much 100 knots. It makes landfall at Cuba. It will temporarily weaken it, still maintaining 50, 60 knots, which is a very strong tropical storm. It reemerges over the eastern Gulf and then re-strengthens 72 knots. I picked up 72 knots back here. Yeah, right here, which is pretty much a 82, 83 mile an hour, or 80 to 85 mile an hour Category 1 hurricane, then bringing it up and making landfall in the Big Bend of Florida. But still, look, even through south central Georgia, maintain those 50 mile an hour winds. So that's what the HWRF is calling for right now. Stay tuned for updates. This was very exciting to talk about because I've been tracking this storm for for a while. I've been tracking this quite frequently too. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for updates. I am the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.